Hello, everybody. We're so glad that you joined us today. My name is Rhonda Mahalik. I'm with Junior Library Guild, and I am the luckiest host today because I have three amazing guests with me, and I am going to introduce them in just a second. But first, I want to quickly give you guys some housekeeping just so you know ahead of time. We are recording this. I know just a minute ago, Kara was asking because she has people who couldn't make it, and we want to make sure that everybody gets to see this. So it is recorded, and it'll be available on demand about an hour after the live event with the same link you used to get here, or you can go to our website, juniorlibraryguild.com/webcasts, and you'll find it there. Wanted to let you know that there is a Q&A box on your screen. If you don't see it, you can use the little icon at the bottom of your screen to have it pop up. And we'd love for you to post your questions in there so that we can have a big conversation with the authors and include your questions in it. There's also a resources box that you should probably be seeing. There's links to a variety of educator guides and other resources for the three books that we're talking about. And so those are very helpful for the educators who are online with us today. And I also just wanted to let you know, if you're hearing a lot of background music, it's just a little glitch in the system. So refresh the screen and it should go away. So that's all that I wanted to just make sure you knew. And now I'm going to introduce my guests. So let me get my notes so I can do it right. So Flavia Drago is our first guest, and she was born and raised in Mexico City, where she dreamed of being a mermaid, which I think is adorable. A talented artist, Flavia started drawing as a child and transitioned from there into a career as a graphic designer and then illustrator. She's a recent graduate of Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge with an MA in children's book illustrations. And her colorful, adorable Gustavo, El Fantasmita, Tímido, that was my attempt, The Shy Ghost, is the first book she's written and illustrated. So we're excited to have the Spanish version in our primary Spanish category for grades K through 3. And we're so excited to have you here, Flavia.
Hello, thank you for having me. This is very exciting for me as well. So,
Good. And she's dressed as La Llorona. Is that how you say it?
Yes, La Llorona. It's a Mexican legend. So the legend says that she was a very beautiful woman, and she was married to a very handsome man, and they had children, and they were very happy. But then she caught him cheating on her. So she got very sad, and she drowned her children in the river. And after that day, she would be seen crying next to the river and just yelling, "Oh, my children," or in Spanish, "Ay, mis hijos." So that's how the legend goes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the weeping woman, Carrie Westerman just said. That's right. Well, welcome. Our second guest is Kara LaReau. She has had a successful career in both editing and publishing, and now writing. She's the author of several what she calls silly and subversive picture books like Ugly Fish and No Slurping, No Burping, A Tale of Table Manners, which I personally wish I had when my kids were toddlers. Kara is also the creative mind behind 3 series, the infamous Ratsos, The Unintentional Adventures of the Bland Sisters, and the one we'll be talking about today, which is brand new, called The Adventures of ZomBert. The first book, The Rise of ZomBert, has been described as fresh and sharply funny with an irresistible touch of macabre. So that's going to be fun. I'm guessing that Kara nailed the tone on this one because she has shared that her Master of Fine Arts thesis was submitted in the form of a screenplay about a female serial killer possessed by a 16th century mad Hungarian countess.
And surprisingly, it's still available. So if anyone from Hollywood is watching or listening, have your people call my people.
That's so much fun. Well, we are thrilled to have ZomBert as a selection in our intermediate Readers Plus category for grades 3 to 5. So that's our middle grade selection. And our last guest today, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting in person, Wil Mara. We met, I believe it was at last year's ALA conference in DC. Wil is a veteran author with more than 270 books under his belt, including works for kids and adults, fiction and nonfiction, and everything in between. His book, The Draft, was actually made into a feature film, Draft Day, starring Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner. So we've got a star in our midst. We are excited to have Wil on the webcast today to talk about his Twisted series, which he refers to as something of a twilight zone for young readers. And just this Tuesday, Wil was named by the New Jersey Association of School Librarians as the 2020 New Jersey Author of the Year. So congratulations, Wil.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me on and for giving me a chance to talk about Twisted. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I have to thank the Junior Library Guild for being so supportive of the series as they have been from the beginning. The first book came out in January of 2019, and you guys have been great with the series all along. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, good. Well, yes, the book that Wil's going to be reading from today, House of a Million Rooms, is a pick in our high-low PG, middle-high category. So that spans for readers 6 to 12. Sixth grade to 12th grade, not ages 6 to 12. So I just wanted to quickly, before we get into the readings, I just wanted to talk about Halloween a little bit, because that's why we're all here. Just because we all love to kind of have that fun costume-wise, spook-wise. And so I wanted to just ask you guys, what do you think of what's maybe the most fun costume you've ever worn? Anyone? Well, I can tell you that whenever I was a kid, my friend and I made for some reason, we were super into Volkswagen Beetles. And so we made a Volkswagen Beetle out of a big refrigerator box. And it was like a convertible one. And so we stood inside of it and walked around. That was the most fun costume for me.
For me, my sister disguised me one day as a mummy. We went into the emergency kit in the house, and we took, I don't know how you call the white things in English. Well, the things that you use to wrap up bandages. And so she wrapped me up in all that thing, and then I was disguised as a mummy, and then I went downstairs, and I really scared my mom a lot. Very much. It was great.
My childhood costume exploits were always thwarted because my mom always made me wear a full set of very thick, white, itchy, long underwear underneath my costume. And so no matter what I tried to be, it was always like, you couldn't really tell because I had like this like long underwear underneath. It was like getting in the way of my costume and like was very itchy. So that's my memory is that kind of horror.
The parent cramping your style.
That's right.
Well, we have from the audience, we have Karen Puckett said she dressed as a dead jogger. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Tweedledum. Maria Garcia was Tweedledum. And Emily Graves was a bag of jelly beans. That's fun too. What about you, Wil? Any memories?
Yeah. The one year I got the costume I really wanted, I kept bothering my mother to get me a Darth Vader costume when it first came out in the 70s. That would be the 1970s, by the way. And it was what I really, really wanted, because usually it was something homemade and something painfully lame, and I just kept bothering her until she went to the store. And I remember walking around with a certain amount of pride and just going forever, ringing doors at 11:30 p.m. when people long had turned their porch lights out. But I was so pleased to have this costume. And when else am I going to wear it? So I just basically wore it around for that one night. I honestly think I still have it somewhere. It doesn't fit me anymore, but I think about wearing it to this day. But
did it have one of those masks with like the elastic that goes around your head?
Yeah,
do you remember that? Because they always had that.
Yeah.
They had that smell, that like plasticky, like it just reminds me of Halloween. That smell of chemical plastic against my face.
It definitely did some damage, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form. And that
That's
plastic
right.
string with the two staples on each side, and the staples would dig into the sides of
Oh,
your head.
yeah.
Remember?
Here's the
Just
side
all
of your
the stuff.
head. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
I
very
think we're
traumatic
still-
evening.
That's funny. Well, let me
Start from
read
that.
more of our audience's creative costumes because these are funny. So Amy King was, and I'm assuming maybe some friends were the California Raisins. Georgette Freeman says that elective teachers and her are all dressed up as doctors. So it will go with their masks. We are the elective surgery crew. That's cute. Richard Simmons, an octopus, a greaser from Greece, Cruella DeVille. Oh, and someone went as the Grim Reaper and went to donate blood while they were dressed that way. And then this one kind of is near and dear to my heart because Karen Puckett dressed as a bee, which I am dressed as a bee. But she put words all over her, so she was a spelling bee.
Spelling bee. So clever.
That's fun. Well, I know you're all interested in hearing these guys read, and I am too. And so I'm going to turn the tables over to Flavia first, who's going to read from Gustavo, and we can't wait to hear it.
Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of pages of Gustavo. The story is basically about a little shy ghost who more than anything in the world wants to make some friends. But as you can guess from the title, Shy Ghost, he has trouble because he's very shy. So I'm going to read and I'm going to show you some of the pages as well. So Gustavo, right, was a ghost. He enjoyed doing the normal things that paranormal beings do, passing through walls, making objects fly, and glowing in the dark. But there was nothing in the world that he loved more than playing violin. Well, almost nothing. He was secretly in love with Alma, the prettiest monster in town. But he also had a problem. You see, Gustavo was so shy that some things felt incredibly difficult for him. And the worst part of it? Making friends was terrifying. Gustavo had never dared to speak to any of the other monsters. So, well, I want to talk a little bit about this spread because when I was a child, I used to be as shy as Gustavo is. So during lunch breaks in kindergarten, I used to sit next to the wall and just wonder how all the children were talking and playing with each other. I thought that was very weird. It's like, how can you just talk to others? It was really hard for me. So what I like about this spread is that Gustavo is doing exactly the same thing. I imagine him just thinking about how are they doing that. That's just so weird. So, I'm going to continue a little bit longer. So he tried getting close to them in many different ways. But even when he was right in front of them, they just couldn't see him. So, as a shy person, the fact that you're shy doesn't mean that you don't want to make any friends. You actually want to be seen. You want them to say hello to you so that you can feel safer in a way, because I think what scared me the most was the feeling of thinking that I was going to be rejected by others. So Gustavo Gustavo longed to be part of something. More than anything, he wanted to make a friend. I have to be brave. I have to let the others see me, he thought. And so I don't know if I should keep reading or not, or if it's better for you just to get the book and figure out how Gustavo manages to get seen. But also this story is about making connections with others through the things that you love doing the most. So this is what, well, that's what this book is about. I don't know. Should I keep reading or is it enough?
Well, audience, you want to pipe into the Q&As and let us know if you want to hear the rest of the book? I mean, I personally do.
Well, I could. It's just, I don't know if we have time. That's what worries me the most, basically.
I think we have time if Wil was right on track with our timing. And it looks like we're getting a lot of yeses. Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, please. So.
Okay, so I'll keep going then. So what Gustavo did is that he decided to send a letter, a very special one. And the letter says, "Dear monsters, I would like to invite you to my violin concert, which will take place at the Day of the Dead party next full moon at the cemetery. I would be thrilled to see you there. Gustavo the Ghost." As the days went by, Gustavo couldn't stop thinking, what if no one shows up? What if they don't like my music? What if they don't like me? Only tonight was the night. And this time he couldn't hide. So, what do you think that happened with Gustavo? But not a soul had come. Oh, horrible monsters. So, all alone, Gustavo did what he loved the most. And the music made him happy. So happy that he glowed. Oh, how he glowed. Oh, Gustavo! Oh, who's that? We're so sorry we're late. We wanted to get you flowers, but we got lost instead. And then we heard your music, and we saw your glow. We really loved your concert. Would you like to hang out with us? From that moment on, Gustavo's life changed. And everyone discovered that even if he didn't talk much, he was the best at helping and protecting his friends. But mostly, Gustavo never stopped surprising them, and they never stopped loving him. The end. And after we see Gustavo with his friends, we get to see him having more adventures on the last bit of the book. So this is how the story goes, and this is the back, which is based on papel picado, which is a type of paper with holes that we put on the ofrendas to use as part of the decorations. So that's it.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I know everybody is saying right now, they're so, so grateful that you read the whole book. One question that came in was, that I thought was an interesting one. I know this is from Judy. I know the Day of the Dead occurs around the same time as Halloween, but she believes it has a different purpose. Is it traditional to blend the two events?
Well, I know that both are different parties, but as a Mexican, well, I grew up with both traditions. We just lived next to the US. So Halloween is also a big part of our childhoods. And I loved both parties, but for different reasons. What I love about the Day of the Dead is that I can think about my loved ones who died, and then I will make a friend and think about their favorite foods and put that on the ofrenda along with the things that they used to have and their pictures. And it's just a beautiful celebration to remember who we loved. And what I loved about Halloween was all the spookiness and the costumes and the horror movies and everything around Halloween. I went out with my cousins and it was fun. So I was very well aware that they were different and I valued them, but for different reasons. Some people in Mexico used to say, oh, you shouldn't be celebrating Halloween, just be very serious. We have Day of the Dead. It's beautiful. But I think that the more celebrations that we get, the happier our lives will be. So this is why I decided to mix both worlds, because actually I grew up celebrating both.
That's fun. Well, one of the questions I had for you and kind of for all of you is, we're talking about scary books, and obviously Gustavo's story isn't scary, although I'm sure it was very nerve-wracking, which is a form of being scared. But the character of a ghost is traditionally associated with more of a spooky story. So I'm wondering, for you, Flavia, why did you choose a ghost to tell this story? And then for everybody, why do you think that, characters that are traditionally associated with scary books draw in readers who might not necessarily have picked up the book before?
I've always loved monsters. I think also monsters and villains are the coolest characters always. They get the best clothes, the best pets, and they just have so much personality. So the reason why I thought about a ghost for the book was that I was on Twitter and then I was thinking about the reason behind ghosts wearing sheets, and then I thought, well, it must be because they're shy, so they want to cover up with a sheet so that people can't really see when they become red and things like that. So that idea got stuck with me, and I thought, that can be a picture book where in the end the little ghost takes the sheet out and then everyone discovers that it's maybe a boy or something like that. But as I started doing some sketches, I decided that if Gustavo was a real ghost, then he could do all sorts of cool things like making objects fly, glowing in the dark, walking through walls, and also I could have I could build a whole world full of monsters who I loved. So this is why Gustavo is a ghost. It started with an idea and then it developed into a book. Also, the fact that he is a ghost, it meant that he could kind of shapeshift, which really helps the storyline. So yeah, this is why Gustavo is a ghost.
And Wil and Kara, do you guys have any thoughts? We've had some people write in with their reactions to why these kind of traditionally scary characters draw people in. People are curious about the unknown, the mystery of the unknown.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit, and I think there are a lot of different ways that a book can be scary, just as there are a lot of different ways that we can be scared. You can be scared by something that's truly scary, or you can just be scared by being in a situation that you're just not familiar with. So I think, on to what's surprising or what's unexpected or a world that's very different from our own, that has different rules, where things aren't black and white, where characters don't need to adhere to like the rules of our world. And I think that maybe those are some of the reasons. I mean, those are some of the reasons I really like scary stories.
Will, anything you want to add, or I can move on to, I have another question for Flavia, and actually there is another question from the audience that I'd love for Flavia to answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit onto what Kara said, which is I think these characters are fascinating because they're so different. You know, we see normal characters in our everyday lives. To go back for a moment to what I mentioned before about Darth Vader, I mean, these kinds of characters are fascinating because they're so different from what we see every day. And, you know, the scarier they are, the badder they are, the more, whatever, morally corrupt they are, however you want to look at it, they're fascinating because it's so different, from what we see. And because there's a fundamental human pleasure with a lot of people in being scared. It's one of the most fundamental emotions we have is fear. And people either try to avoid it or they indulge in it because they get something of pleasure out of it. I think that probably has something to do with it too.
Yeah. And I think for kids, you know, I think a lot of grown-ups try to shield kids from things that are scary from a very young age. They're taught that, you know, they're supposed to stay away from things that are scary. And so I think because of that, they maybe consider scary things to be kind of grown up, that reading a scary story is getting a little bit of a window into something that they weren't allowed to do before. So I think there might be a little bit of that in there too.
I can see that.
I'd like to add something. Another thing that I really like about monsters is that they are basically just metaphors that reflect another side of human life, what is unknown, what is different. And monsters doesn't have to be necessarily scary. Just look at at Frankenstein's monster. He was good. He just had a weird appearance, and then the world made him become a real monster. So I really think that monsters are fascinating, and just like Guillermo del Toro, I love monsters. They're great.
Actually, Flavia, one of the questions that came in for you from Michelle is, what's your favorite monster?
My favorite monsters, I think witches are my favorite monsters because they aren't really monsters. They are ambiguous. They're just, they're powerful women who chose to be free, that can be seen as scary, or maybe their wisdom scares other people. And what I like about witches is that they can be beautiful, they can look completely normal, or they can be weird and they can fly. And I think they're just the coolest monster, really.
I love it. Well, thank you. Let's move on to Kara's reading so that we can make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to read. But please keep sending your questions in. I know that there's not time for all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And we'll hopefully have some time at the very end. So Kara is now going to read from Rise of ZomBert and take it away.
Great. So I'm just going to preface this with two points. One is you'll see as I read the illustrations in this book. So even though this book is a novel and has chapters, it's fully illustrated by a brilliant artist named Ryan Andrews. And so I just want to credit him because he really brought the characters and the setting of my story to life. And the other thing I want to say is that the story is told from 3 different points of view. So one point of view is of ZomBert, who we'll talk about in a bit. He's a cat who may or may not be a zombie. One of the points of view is Melly, who's a young girl who ends up crossing paths with ZomBert. And the third point of view is, well, you'll have to read the book to find out about that third point of view. I'll leave that as a surprise. So the first chapter is ZomBert's point of view, and the second chapter is Melly's point of view. So chapter 1. It It was a cold fall night in the town of Lambert, and the moon was full. The only sounds were the buzzing of the street lamps and the scattering of dead leaves across the windy, empty streets, and in a lab on the outskirts of town, the creak of a cage door. A shadowy figure emerged from that cage. Bloodied and frail, he slunk through the room, sniffing the air. He would have to be quick. The assistant on duty had left the lab and could be back at any moment. The inhabitants of the other cages looked on encouragingly. "I'll come back for you," he seemed to tell them. "I promise." As he scrambled away through an air duct, those who remained behind were silent. They wanted to give at least one of their number the best chance of escape. The shadowy figure made his way through the maze of the air duct system, sniffing all the way until he found where it vented to the outside. Using his remaining energy, he jumped. The air outside was crisp and cold, not stale like it was in the lab, and he let it fill his lungs. He assessed the fence, which he thought he'd need to scale, but then he saw the hole. It was a good-sized hole, so he'd have no problem getting through. The problem was that he was weak, so weak. He hadn't eaten in a couple of days. He couldn't stomach the food they'd been giving him, which was too soft and smelled wrong and didn't have any crunchy bones or pulsing blood in it. Food always tasted better when you caught it and killed it yourself, and it had been a long time since he'd been able to hunt the way he liked. Too long. He needed energy now. He saw the dumpster, which was too tall for him to jump into in his condition, but then he saw the barrel. He sniffed and smelled something that just might be food. He had no energy left to jump, so all he could do was let himself fall and then land, amid nothing but empty cans and bottles and other trash. He had failed, he thought, and then he passed out. Eventually, the lab assistant returned and finished the remainder of his shift. The sun had begun to rise over Lambert, and the empty cage marked Y91 wouldn't be noticed until later that morning. Now I'm going to read chapter 2. "Everybody say frittata," my dad said. "Frittata," yelled Emmett. It's Tata, yelled Ezra, clapping his hands. Dad circled around the table, taking video of the twins with his phone. I covered my face. "Come on, Melly," he said. "Don't you want to be in this one? I'm thinking of calling it Sunday Fun Day Breakfast." I shook my head. I knew Mom and Dad wanted me to want to participate. After all, their blog was called Family, Food, and Fun. "Melly, don't touch the bacon yet," my mother said. "But I'm hungry," I said. I groaned and held my stomach for maximum effect. "Well, I'm still trying to get a photo," Mom said, adjusting her camera lens. "This light just isn't right." "Maybe you need the reflector," my father suggested. "Good idea," Mom said. As she ran off to get it, my father finally sat down. "So," he said, "any big plans for today?" "Danny and I are going to hang out," I said, "and I still need to pick a topic for my presentation." We were studying organisms at school, and everyone in my class was supposed to do an oral report on a living thing. "Do you have any ideas yet?" my father asked. "I have a whole list," I said, pulling it out of the pocket of my favorite coveralls, where I'd put it so I could share it with Danny later. Garden slug, millipede, flying squirrel, sea urchin, vampire bat, Portuguese man-of-war, Komodo dragon, duck-billed platypus. "That's quite a menagerie," my father said. "I want to pick something unique," I explained. "Unique like you," my father said, ruffling my hair. "Unique," shouted Emmett. "Neek, neek," shouted Ezra. My father grabbed his phone, hit video, and pointed it at the twins. "Ooh, can you two say that again?" he asked. "Time to photograph some bacon," my mother said, returning with the reflector. Unfortunately, my parents seemed more interested in cooking and photographing our food than actually eating it, which meant I hadn't eaten a hot meal in more than 2 years. They started blogging when they were trying to have another baby, and then they really got into it when they adopted the twins. Dad used to be a chef, and Mom used to be a freelance writer. When the blog took off, they quit their jobs. Now this was all they did, full time. That morning, I managed to eat a few bites of cold frittata and gulp down my orange juice. May I be excused, I asked? But my parents were too busy trying to get Emma and Ezra to sing a song about bacon and eggs. It was a song they used to sing to me at breakfast before the twins came along. I put my plate in the dishwasher and headed for the door. I'm going to meet Danny, I shouted, as if anyone really cared. Soon after that, I was lying in a pool of blood. Okay, actually, it was fake blood. Danny makes it himself using his own special recipe. It's supposed to be edible, but it grosses me out too much to taste it. And I was lying near it more than in it, since it grosses me out too much to touch it. Danny says I should get used to it since I want to be a scientist, but I have plenty of time to be grossed out before that happens. I suppose you could say we were trespassing, but when Danny and I found a hole in the back fence at the Yumco Foods Factory, we took it as an invitation. Danny was the one who insisted on filming there. I thought the town cemetery or the woods behind my house would be better settings for a horror movie, but since we'd found the hole in the fence a few months before, Danny had been obsessed with filming at the factory. He thought it would make a great horror movie set since it's at the edge of town and is big and white with tiny windows, the kind of place where evil scientists might conduct secret experiments. And set into the hill above the factory is the old mansion where Stuart Yum, the CEO of Yumco, lives. Danny is obsessed with horror movies, and he's always scouting for locations, as he puts it. He even has his own online channel called Hurl Vision, though he doesn't have too many viewers. Danny says it takes time to build up a fan base. Anyway, I was lying on the pavement of the loading dock behind a dumpster. We made sure to position me so Danny could get some good footage without anyone seeing us. As Danny filmed, Yumco Foods workers in their trademark brown and green uniforms were loading boxes and yelling to one another from inside and outside the factory. Your mask is crooked, Danny said. This was the only way I'd agree to be on camera, if I could cover my face. Danny made the mask out of paper mache and painted it to look like a ghoul with red eyes and fangs. That's the name of the movie he was making, Gone Ghoul. It was just as I was trying to adjust the mask that I heard the noise. Meow. Did you hear that, I asked. What, Danny said. I thought it was my own stomach, seeing as it was squeezed between the dumpster and the brick wall of the factory. Also, it was almost lunchtime. Then I heard it again. Meow. I think it's coming from inside, I said. Help me with this. Danny and I lifted the dumpster lid. Gah, he said. All we saw and smelled was garbage. We tried to let go of the lid gently, but it still hit the dumpster with a clang. We looked around to see if anyone noticed, but no one did. The Yumco workers were still loading and unloading like robots. Meow. Now I hear it, Danny admitted. It's not coming from the dumpster, I said. It was coming from a big blue recycling barrel next to the dumpster. I looked inside. At first, I just saw two pale yellow eyes. I squinted and leaned in, and the eyes became part of a head, and the head became part of a cat. And it wasn't just any cat. It was the ugliest cat I'd ever seen. I'm going to stop there. I think that's a good place to stop.
That's great. I see so many parallels in some ways to the characters in Little Gustavo, so this was a fun transition.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a different question I was going to ask you first, but there's been a question that's been repeated a couple times, and I thought it would be a good one for you to answer, and maybe Will might be able to weigh in on this. What is it like to write a scary book? Like, what's different than writing some of your other series that maybe don't have the scare factor?
Well, in a lot of writing I do for young readers, especially since, I write for a lot of different age groups, so I write for younger readers too. Sometimes I feel like we're encouraged to create an ideal world where your characters are ultimately making the right decisions and they end up following the right path, and that everything is resolved in the end in a way that's satisfying. And when I say that, I mean that that's what grown-ups encourage us to write that way for children. I don't know that children always necessarily want an ending that's like that. So it's nice to have a chance to create characters and situations who stray from the straight and narrow path and offer behaviors and a reality that's a little more ambiguous.
What about you, Will? I know you've gotten your hands in all sorts of different genres.
Yeah, I think when you're writing scarier material for kids, you're tapping into an entirely different emotional set. And I think you're going for something different. And a lot of times that's not necessarily the terminus of what you're trying to do as an author. You can grab somebody with fear and then lead them someplace else. Mm-hmm. There's a lot you can do with fear. Fear provides a writer with a very varied palette and a big canvas and a couple of nice different brushes. You can take fear into a lot of different places. You can go from scary to scarier. You can go from scary to revealing and enlightening. And you can give out life lessons. You know, like with the Twisted books, just as an example, I like to grab them at the beginning with something intriguing, bring them through kind of a scary journey, but it's not necessarily going to end up in a scary place. A lot of times they walk away learning something about life or about themselves. So fear has its value, I think, with writing with kids, but I don't know that that's ultimately the final goal in literature, unless your purpose is to say, this is scary, and then at the end go, you know, see, it really is scary and it's very scary.
Yeah,
but you can do so much more with it beyond that. I like using fear because it's probably our most elemental emotion, but it's also a very diversified and very flexible starting point.
Yeah. What do any of you have a favorite scary book?
Think.
As a parent, I can tell you that there were parts of Pet Sematary that scared the hell out of me. I don't want to give too much of the book away, but if you are a parent or anybody who cares about children, it's a very unsettling book. That really got to me. That was maybe the only King novel I couldn't finish.
Oh wow!
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I mean, who wants to see
scary
children,
book?
you know, who wants to see kids suffer to that degree?
Yeah, for
Stephen
sure.
King, maybe. The master of horror.
Oh yeah.
I have my own favorites from childhood and that I enjoy now. But I know a book that I didn't read when I was a kid, but I read as a grown-up, you know, when I was an editor, is the picture book, The Monster at the End of This Book. It's like the Sesame Street book with Grover.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it's a major classic now, but I think it was like just beyond me when like I was a little too old for it when it came out. But that is such a classic that, you know, and it's very universal that he's afraid and he wants, you know, he doesn't want us to turn the page. So it's very interactive and you get pulled into his world, only to find at the end, I don't want to give it away. I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a great twist at the end.
Yeah.
And the twist isn't scary, but it's surprising. So it's that other level of unexpected.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites too. Absolutely. I was so glad to be able to buy it when my boys were little.
Yeah.
We have
Me
folks
too.
writing in. Rachel loves Goosebumps. She thinks The Haunted Car was the scariest one. Karen agrees that many King novels have children suffering. Let's see. Another agreement with you about Pet Sematary. Favorite scary book for kids, Mindy says Alvin Schwartz, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Drawings. Brian likes the Last Apprentice series, starting with The Revenge of the Witch and also Misery. Yeah, that one's a creepy one.
Also, talking about Alvin Schwartz, In a Dark, Dark Room is one of the best scary books for children that have ever been written because it's actually unsettling. The story about the girl with the green ribbon is just very mysterious until the end. It scares you. And And also the illustrations are fantastic. So this is one of my favorites, probably, for children.
And you even have a physical copy. Well, how do you balance and Will, this is probably really interesting from your perspective, having written thrillers for adults and for kids, but how do you balance for a younger audience being scary but not too scary? Like, where do you know where you gotta kind of draw the line?
I think you just have to have a sense of, I try to take an approach like with a different tone. You know, as the narrator, I try to take a different feel when I sit down and write it. And I think simply being, you know, as a human being, as a parent, as someone who's done a little teaching myself, and with all the school appearances I've done, I just sort of get a sense after a while of, you know, you can't go past this line. You just sort of get a sense that you're there, that you're up to it. And, you know, with adult material, obviously I could stretch a lot further. It really gives me a lot more room to run, you know, like with some of the twisted books, even some of the as yet to be written twisted books. There, you know, I have fully outlined ideas for another about 35 stories.
Oh,
some
wow.
of them were originally intended for adults, you know, because I could do a lot more with them from that perspective. So after a while, you just get a sense of this isn't really appropriate for kids. But I don't think it's a writer's skill. I think it's a just an experienced adult skill. You know, talking to kids a lot with all the school visits I do, you just get a sense, like a gut feeling after a while, I can go here, but I can't go here. And I do think about things like, will the parents approve? Will the librarians approve? Will other educators approve? Because, you know, with kids, if you go too far into the adult zone, half the time they love it, right? So you sort of have to hold yourself back a little bit. But I think it's more intuitive than anything else. I don't think it's that scientific. I think it's more instinctive.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find yourself like holding back anywhere, Kara, when you were writing? This was for a little bit younger audience even than Twisted.
Yeah, so ZomBert was probably a little older than I'd ever written before. And I think when I handed in the first draft, my editor told me she wanted it to be even scarier. So, I mean, I have to say that I don't consider my book to be truly scary. I think it's more spooky or even creepy. But maybe it's not the kind of thing that's going to jolt you or horrify you. It's going to be more like it's going to make you uncomfortable, or it's going to make you like shiver or maybe even gross you out a little bit. And so I think for me, it was probably a good decision because I'm writing for younger kids to make it like less scary at first and then have someone say to me, oh, you can go farther. Like, I'm happy to hear that, that I could go farther. And then I was able to tease certain things out of it and say like, oh yeah, I actually was going to make that scarier, but I held back and I'm not going to hold back anymore. So.
I think that saying that you write horror for children is a sort of paradox, because then adults will just think about like, oh, what? Wait, horror for children? Children should be protected and you should keep them safe and you don't want to horrify them with stories. But ultimately, there's plenty of literature that can be very horrifying. It's just labeled differently. Like fairy tales. Fairy tales can be quite dark and gruesome, but they aren't labeled as horror. They're fairy tales, or even some lullabies can be very creepy, but they are just lovely songs for children. So you wouldn't say that it's horror. You would say that it's fairy tales, or that it's a thriller, or that it's a lullaby, but you would never call it horror itself, even if it's horrifying. I don't know.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting.
I think the thing about these stories is that they're just stories. So it allows kids to explore things that are scary or creepy or spooky in a controlled way. You know, it's between the covers of this book. So it allows them to like explore those things and question those things in a way that's like more controlled than real life.
Exactly.
Well, I hate to interrupt here, but I want to make sure that Wil has an opportunity to read. And I also want to say we're inching up to the top of the hour, but we're all willing to stay. So please continue staying with us so that we can hear Wil speak, and then we can also have a conversation after that. So Wil, take it away.
Okay. All right. Well, the book that I'm going to read from is called House of a Million Rooms. It was the second book released in the Twisted series. Rhonda, like you had said before, the Twisted series is sort of like a collection of Twilight Zones for kids. That's probably oversimplifying it to a degree, but one of the nice things about that is it's not like a soap opera where you have to read every book in the series. A question I get a lot from librarians and from kids is, do I need to buy one to buy number 2 and number 3? But you don't. These are all individual stories. So just to give you some very, very quick background, the idea when we put these, we put the Twisted books together, because they were published through Rosen Publishing, is, we weren't trying to take, when it came time to discuss with the publisher how we wanted to approach our audience, we realized we had a real opportunity with these books, which was we didn't need to go into a high writing level for any particular reasons. So by calibrating the Twisted stories to be suitable for advanced readers, and yet perfectly accessible to, say, reluctance and high lows and so forth, we would gain a much bigger audience and have much greater opportunities. And that turned out to be fortuitous, because the librarians, realized pretty quickly that the Twisted books were bringing in readers who wouldn't normally even touch a novel, in spite of the fact that some of the material was, like Kara said before, like some of it was spooky, some of it was scary, some of it supernatural. And, the stories had an attention to detail for a broad readership and for diversity, where we never had any intention, even from the beginning, to have the kids all be suburban or all be white or all be privileged or anything like that. So Twisted has provided a really nice broad canvas, like I said before, and the series has been developed over a period of over 30 years, where all the material in all of those books, every line, every paragraph, every word is there for a reason, based on conversations we've had with librarians and parents and students and other educators. So I think House of a Million Rooms is very indicative of the series as a whole, because that was the story that came first. That's the one that, I had that idea, and then another one similar that was kind of Twilight Zone-y. And once I had enough of them, I realized I had a collection, and I was, sort of an idea was shaping up here that I was trying to do this metaphysical thing where we had thematics where kids could learn about life, and it wasn't just all candy coating where it was scary and spooky at the beginning and scary and spooky at the end, but that's all it was. There were a lot of opportunities here to do a lot and teach a lot for kids. So House of a Million Rooms came first. I had the idea for it in 1990. It was published in 2019 in March. And I'm going to read the first chapter. And if you feel we have time, I'll read the second chapter too, but I'll at least read the first chapter of it. And the summary, just real quick, so everybody knows where we're going, that's written into the catalogs is, I'm reading off the screen. I don't have the physical book in front of me. 3 friends go against their parents' wishes and enter the old house that's been sitting abandoned on the edge of town for over 100 years, and quickly realize getting back out isn't simply a matter of turning around. And this is chapter 1. Wow, Ryan whispered. It's really there. I can't believe it, Samantha added. It's so cool, Josh said excitedly. They stood along the edge of the forest. There was a long open field in front of them, and in the middle of the field was a house. It was very old and very big. There was no paint on the outside, just bare wood that had turned gray from years in the sun. Other than that, it looked to be in good shape. An old house, but a strong house. They couldn't take their eyes off it. They just stood there getting soaked as the rain drove through the trees, sounding like popcorn in the microwave. It's really been here all this time? Samantha asked. Her long dark hair was stuck to the sides of her face. Ryan shrugged. He was the smallest of the 3. He was also the only one who wore glasses. I guess so, he said. The note was from 1953. Ryan had found the note in an old book. He had been in the school library earlier that day. He was working on a report about colonial America. The library had 6 different books on the subject. Most of them were pretty new. One, however, looked like it was about to fall apart. Ryan loved books. Sure, the internet was great, but there was nothing like a real book. He took the old one off the shelf. The first thing he did was open it up and smell it. Old books have the greatest smell in the world, he thought. Then he started going through the pages. The pictures were all black and white, and they were drawings, not photographs. Ryan didn't think that a book this old could help with the report, but he liked looking through it anyway. Somewhere around the middle, he found a folded sheet of paper. It was caught between two pages. When he unfolded it, he saw writing from top to bottom. The ink wasn't black anymore. It had turned brown over time. Then he noticed the date at the top, June 7th, 1953. Wow, he thought, it's been here that long. There were two different types of handwriting. He read the first few lines. Are you going to Alan's party on Saturday? I'm not sure. Mom and Dad probably won't let me. Are you? Yeah. It sounds like it'll be swell. It will be. You have to go. This was some kind of secret note, Ryan realized. Someone left it in a book. And then another person found it and wrote a reply. It went back and forth like that until whenever. Today, we just send text messages, Ryan thought, but they didn't have cell phones in 1953. He was pretty sure it was between a boy and a girl. The boy really wanted the girl to go to this party. He kept asking, and she kept giving reasons why she couldn't. Boring, Ryan thought. Then he turned the note over. There was more writing on the other side. At first, it was all the same stuff. And then it wasn't so boring after all. In fact, it was anything but. Greg and I are going to check out that old house. What old house? The one out on the west side of town through the woods. You know you can't do that. Why not? Carl, that place is bad news. And if you get caught, you'll get in so much trouble. I hear it's haunted. Who wouldn't want to check out a house that's haunted? It'll be a blast. It doesn't matter. You know no one is allowed to go near it. Nobody. That's what my mom said when I asked her about it. My parents have told me and over never to go near it either. They bug me about it at least once a year. One time they asked why, and I asked why, and they grounded me for a week. Mom told me never to go ask about it again. Boy, was she mad. Carl, please, promise me you won't go near it, please? Will you go to Alan's party with me on Saturday? Yes. I'll figure something out, but please promise me. Okay, I promise. Ryan showed Josh the note. Then Josh showed Samantha. A few hours later, here they were. Have you ever even heard anyone talk about it? Ryan asked. Samantha shook her head. Not me. I haven't either, Josh said. He was tall for his age and very athletic. He had brown hair that was thick up top but short around the sides. But I've heard stories about things that have happened in this area. I heard the ground around here has poison in it or something, Samantha said. Right, Josh went on. Some kind of government testing years ago? Yeah. Can you imagine it? Josh wondered. Government testing here in the little town of Fairmont? Ryan was nodding. I heard the same thing, but he took out his iPhone and held it up. He used his other hand to cover it from the rain. I've got an app here that detects dangerous radiation, electromagnetic waves. Josh rolled his eyes and smiled. Of course you do. Ryan looked closely at the screen, and there doesn't seem to be any, not even a tiny bit. Josh turned back to the house and put his hands on his hips. The rain had matted his brown hair flat to his head. So what's the big deal then? I have no idea. And the fence, too, Josh went on, with all those signs. When they were walking through the woods to get there, they came to a fence. It was the metal kind with all the diamond-shaped holes. And there were signs on it that said, danger, do not enter. Josh had to bend the fence up at the bottom so they could crawl through. I'll bet there's more to this, he said. We should check it out. At that moment, a roll of thunder boomed in the distance. Then came a flash of lightning. Not now, Samantha said. The storm's getting worse. We should get out of here, Ryan added. Being near trees when there's lightning is a really bad idea. Josh didn't seem to hear them. He was still staring at the house. I wonder what's in there, he said finally. It sounded like he was talking mostly to himself. Lightning cracked again. This time it was very close. Josh, come on, Samantha said, grabbing his hand. Huh? He seemed to have been in a trance. Oh, yeah, okay, but I'm coming back. That's probably a bad idea, Samantha replied, but either way, not today. Let's go. Before the lightning fries us, Ryan said, like 3 eggs. Okay, Josh told him. He kept looking back, though. It was as if the house held some kind of power over him. After they were gone, lightning struck one more time. It hit so close that the whole house seemed to light up. And in that moment, a shape appeared in one of the upstairs windows, the shape of a person.
Oh, thank you, Will. I'm actually really glad that you're in your introduction. You went through some of the things that I had wanted to talk to you about, because I know that we're coming up so close to the end. So, because I know you and I talked a lot about them being so perfect for the high-low and reluctant readers and stuff. So I'm glad you were able to touch on that, because we have other questions that have come in. And so rather than get stuck on mine, I thought it would be kind of fun. And I also wanted to make sure to give this plug. In the resources box, there is a form you can fill out for a giveaway, and Will has donated an entire signed copy, autographed copy of the Twisted series that will go to one lucky school, and a second, even luckier school will win the entire signed set, as well as a virtual author visit from Will. So make sure that you fill out that form before the webcast ends. So one of the questions that has come in for a lot of you guys, oh shoot, I lost that one. I lost that question. So I'm going to go to this one. One of the teachers Hannah talks about being in charge of Battle of the Books, and they chose last year Scary Stories for Young Foxes, which is also a JLG selection. And a lot of the parents apparently said that it was too disturbing for middle schoolers. And so her question was kind of, how do you kind of get around that parent opinion when there, again, is such an appeal for books like this for that grade, those grades?
Well, in my view, it's impossible to avoid it entirely, because it's so subjective what constitutes disturbing. I don't know that you can necessarily nail that down and make it sharp-edged enough to be able to define it and work around it and work with it. You know, the reality is some parents, some teachers, some school systems will be perfectly okay with books that others aren't. So I think it's very hit or miss. I don't think that's definable.
Yeah. I mean, no matter what I do, I can only just tell the best story I can that is as truthful as I can make it. And, you know, if I tried to adjust my story to suit other people, I think I would end up with something that didn't feel true to me. So I just have to use my own idea in my head of what feels truthful.
There are a lot of people also wondering, for the three of you, how did you decide to become an author? Like, what prompted you, inspired you?
I don't. Now that I've had, this is my 35th year as an author, looking back on it, I would say very quickly, because I want to give my wonderful fellow authors a chance to answer. Looking back now, I don't think that I had a choice. I mean, you're either wired up to do it or you aren't, I guess. But looking back now, I can't imagine that there was anything else. I don't know that I chose to. I think I just one day realized that I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, I always loved hearing stories and telling stories, even before I knew how to read. And then once I learned how to read, that's all I ever wanted to do. And then when I was in about second grade, an author illustrator came to my school and talked to my school, kind of like how we're talking to everyone right now. And, you know, I was 7 years old, and that's the first time I realized, like, you could actually tell stories for a living and people will pay you to do that. And once I realized that was even a remote possibility, that was it. That's like all I ever wanted to do.
For me, it was a long process. I studied graphic design, and then I thought that I wanted to work in branding and advertising and packaging. But then as I started working, I discovered that what I really wanted to do was to tell stories. With every project that I was developing, I wanted to tell a story. And then I kind of thought that if there were people making books, maybe you could make a living out of that. But I didn't know how. So I started reaching to other illustrators and went into book fairs. And then I kind of discovered that I wanted to tell the stories that I would have liked to have read myself. So I focused on trying to do that until it happened. But I'm just starting. Hopefully there will be more stories to come.
Yeah, we hope. I wanted to tell you, all three of you, that there are several people on here, and I have to scroll down now to find the name, but one of our attendees said she just purchased all three of the books just while you guys were reading. And then for Wil, there's a question, when is the next book in the series coming out?
There are two more that are completed. I can give you the titles. I don't want to give away any other information at this time. One is called A Pool of Deathly Blue. And the second one, The Other, is called The Other. Oh. We went back and forth on two different titles. I wanted to originally call it I Was Born Twice, but we decided The Other sounds creepier. So those are the next two that are coming out. I don't have release dates yet because COVID screwed up so much of the publishing schedule in so many publishing houses, not just mine. And I'm working on other ones now. And I'm also developing stories as part of the television series, the Twisted television series that we're developing. There's some stories there that we're developing for the series, television series, that will eventually be books, but may actually end up on screen first. So, it's almost like you got to follow Twisted along pretty carefully because so much is happening so quickly and it's developing so fast in so many different directions. But again, I can tell you that the two next books, which are finished manuscripts, are likely going to be A Pool of Deathly Blue and one called The Other.
Cool. Jane asks, is it difficult to come up with your titles? Do you come up with the story first and then the title, or vice versa?
Is that for me or for all of us?
Well, really for any of you. I think that was I think that was directed toward you because you were talking about switching titles.
The only time with all the books I've published, the only time I ever wrote with a title first was the 5th book in the Twisted series, a book called The Girl Who Grew Nasty Things. The title popped into my head one day and I liked it, and I brought it up to my editor and she said, that sounds pretty intriguing. Do you have a story yet? And I said, no, give me a couple of days. And I wrote a story around a title I liked very much. But generally, otherwise, I've never come up with a title first, ever.
That's interesting because I usually come up with the title first. Like I'll just, I'll be going about my day as one does, and I'll see something that inspires me, or someone will say something that inspires me. And in this case, the original title for Rise of ZomBert was going to be Undead Thread. And then I did some research, and I think Undead Thread, there's either another book out there called that, or there's something else out there that's called Undead Thread. And I was like, I don't want to, be derivative.
Thread, I bet.
So I did a little bit more, more thinking, and Rise of ZomBert came to me. But usually I'll have a title, and I'm like, that's a really cool title. I would love to write a story that lives up to that title. And that's usually like my first challenge.
For me, the idea comes first, and then it comes the images, because I have to tell my story with images as well as words. So if I can draw it, I know I can tell the story. So the images come, and then I write simultaneously, and then I make the addition, and then lastly comes the title. And sometimes I struggle a lot with that. So yeah, story
Actually,
first, title last.
Flavia, Georgette asks, she says, my daughter is an aspiring artist and graphic novelist. Do you have any suggestions on how she could get her foot in the door?
Well, not really. I think we all have different paths. And with illustration, it's funny because there are illustrators who come from different backgrounds. Some of them come from architecture, some of them are historians, some of us are graphic designers. So I think the only thing that you need to keep in your mind is that what you want to achieve one day, and then you have to keep working towards that goal. And for doing that, maybe you need to find other people who do the same, and draw a lot. Basically, drawing all the time, and writing as well. If she wants to create stories, a lot of practice will be will be very good.
Flavia, do you ever plan to write a graphic novel?
Not yet. No, I don't have that on my plans, but I have a project which might become a graphic novel. I don't know yet. No. I'm more focused on picture books and maybe creating some other picture books that are more experimental. I want to work with cutout and shadows and inks that glow, but that's just an abstract idea right now. I would have to develop that in the future. Let's see if that becomes true.
Well, this has been so much fun. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to all three of you. Actually, Georgette just mentions that she bets Wil's books would become great graphic novels. I think you're probably right on that. They'd be kind of perfect for that style. So I just want to thank you all three for just joining us today. It has been great. I'm so glad that you were all able to read. I'm so grateful for all of you who came and joined us today. And we will be sending an email out tomorrow with a link to this recorded webcast, so you can share it with anyone who may not have been able to go. And then also we'll give you links to those resources. So if you didn't have an opportunity yet to sign up for Wil's giveaway, we'll make sure that you get a chance through those emails. So we'll leave the giveaway open a little bit longer. So thank you again, everyone. Take care. We hope to see you at our next webcast, which is actually next week. Let me put this slide here. We actually have Margarita Engel and Rafael Lopez, who were the tag team behind Dancing Hands. They're going to be with us, and it's for Picture Book Month. So Flavia, you'll probably enjoy that. But they're going to talk to us together about their book, and we can't wait to have them. So please, there's a link in the resources also to sign up for that webcast. So we'd love to see you there. Thanks again, and thanks for sticking around long for us so we could all get this in.
My pleasure. No problem.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Thank you. Happy Halloween. Happy Day of the Dead.
Happy Halloween.
Same to you.